This week, we got the sad news that Bob Weir of the Grateful Dead passed away at 78 years old. And on this episode of BV Weekly, we're joined by special guest, Sonic Youth member, and lifelong Grateful Dead fan Lee Ranaldo to reflect on the impact that Bob left. We also talk new music from Mitski, Zach Bryan, Poison the Well, Lee's Sonic Youth bandmate Kim Gordon, and more. So how come no one told me that One Battle After Another had so many musicians in it?
Well, I didn't tell you because I didn't know.
I actually saw it like a day or two before the Golden Globes, which was good because then made the Golden Globes more relevant when it won all those awards for me personally. But
Well, you were already hip to K-pop Demon Hunters.
K-pop, long time K-pop, old school K-pop Demon Hunters. But One Battle After Another, I was fully aware it existed, and I was trying to see it ASAP, especially after it got on HBO. But it wasn't until I actually sat down to watch it, partially because I try to avoid all spoilers in movies, so I don't really pay attention to much talk of movies, but I didn't realize how relevant it was to our musical interests until like I started seeing all these musicians popping up on the screen as I was watching it. So sorry to spoil it for you if you still haven't seen it, but I feel like most people probably know this stuff in advance anyway. If you didn't know, it very prominently, well, most prominently features Teyana Taylor, who actually won Best Supporting Actress, I think, at Golden Globe for it. So she's got like a pretty major role. I didn't even realize that part. Like I knew Leonardo DiCaprio was in it, but when she got announced for SNL, which she's hosting coming up, it didn't even like click at the time. Oh, right. Like this acclaimed also actress because of One Battle After Another at a minimum. But then you're watching it, and there is a Alana Haim, not her first Safdie Brothers movie, but yeah, or Haim. I still want to say Haim. I know it's Haim, but I still want to say Haim. Do you ever feel that way?
No, I always say Haim. Sorry.
Okay, fine. Alana Haim of Haim, aka Haim in my mind. She's been in other movies, his movies, whatever. She's in there.
I'm just glad that finally you're pronouncing a band name wrong.
I think regular listeners know that I'm constantly pronouncing band names wrong, probably more than I realize. But then Jungle Pussy is in the movie. And in case you didn't recognize her, her character name in the movie is also Jungle Pussy. And then...
Is she as herself, or is it coincidentally?
No spoilers.
All right.
But let's just say there's probably many people who are not aware of her as a musician, but now will never forget that character name. You know, it's a good name, Jungle Pussy, in there. And then so maybe most surprisingly, considering how like kind of current and of like last year he was, Dijon is an actor in that movie. So I looked back and then I saw I'd like kind of missed the headlines that Dijon was in this movie when it came out. And stuff. But anyway, yeah, like Dijon, who in addition to being crowned Pitchfork Artist of the Year in 2025, a huge album, is also an actor in like biggest movie of the year. So that was quick for him. He's not totally new. He's been around, but a few years anyway. And then one last one. This one's more obscure, but it's a fun fact, so I wanted to say it. Paul Grimstad, I think that's how you say his name. He's not even a famous actor, but he's a professor at Yale, actually. But in 2025, he somehow landed roles in both One Battle After Another and Marty Supreme. And there's actually like a New York Times article just pointing out how this kind of unknown guy is in both of these movies. And he's not a young guy either. He's also a musician. He's got a lot of albums out. I actually saw he played Baby's All Right last year, but this kind of the most fun fact to me about him, he used to be in a band called X Action, who in 1999 released a split with The Faint. So yeah, there's a lot of music angles there on One Battle After Another.
And Marty Supreme, as we've talked about already.
Yes, Marty Supreme I kind of knew was so like full of
Tyler
cameos.
the Creator is in it. Right?
Yeah, he's in it. Yeah, Marty Supreme as well. So that's not the only. Paul is in both. And then like actually Johnny Greenwood did the score for One Battle After Another. And then One O Tricks Point Never did the score for Marty Supreme.
Mm-hmm.
And then with, I think, Wise Blood in the
Right, right, right.
backing vocals there. And, the Safdie guy was, while One Battle After Another was in the movies, was also at Cameron Winter's show, filming him at Carnegie Hall, right?
Wait, is One Battle After Another also Safdie's? Or is just
Oh,
I know
that's Marty
Marty
Supreme, right?
Supreme, yeah.
Oh, no, One Battle After Another is,
Oh, it's Paul Thomas Anderson, right?
yeah, who was
It
also,
was and he has tons of Radiohead connections already.
oh,
So
yeah.
right? So, yeah, so the just like One Hundred Point Never and Safdie's are
All right, just to clear things up, Paul Thomas Anderson did One Battle After Another. Josh Safdie did Marty Supreme. The other Safdie, Benny Safdie, and Paul Thomas Anderson were both filming Cameron Winter at Carnegie Hall, while One Battle After Another and Marty Supreme were both like the biggest new movies, something like that. I think
so
that clears it up.
Cameron Winter is the great uniter.
I think so. And Paul Grimstead.
Right.
All
Well,
right,
one
moving
day
on.
we'll do a podcast episode where we don't talk about Geese or Cameron Winter. One day.
Spoiler alert. This is only there's at least one more mention coming. All right. Yeah, so Lee Ranaldo is going to join us to talk Bob Weir in a little bit. But before that, my most listened to album this past week, maybe just because of its length, honestly, it's 50 songs technically, is the new Zach Bryan. If you don't know the story, he released his full album, 25 songs, as he is to do. And he then, days later, released an acoustic version of the exact same album. And if you go on streaming and you just want to play, you start at the acoustic album, he tacked the regular album on at the end. The acoustic one is actually only 24 songs because he didn't make an acoustic version of the spoken word track one on the original album. So that
But
uniquely
then he
lives.
released another non-album track like days later.
Oh yeah, I haven't
So
even.
it's
I
like,
am not caught up on that track yet.
yeah, it's as in case there wasn't enough Zach Bryan.
So the reason Zach produced the entire acoustic version of the album days later is because he said, I don't even know if this is I don't even know if this happened, but he said people are going to claim this new album is overproduced. And so I'm going to release now an acoustic version to calm the haters.
Now I think that Zach should just own it. Like, I mean, first of all, to back up, I think it's kind of crazy if you do call the album overproduced, especially in the context of which it exists, which is that Zach Bryan is a country superstar who's gearing up for a stadium tour, playing multiple nights in the same city at certain stadiums. He's one of the biggest country singers in the world, and he does not sound like a mainstream country artist at all. I mean, he like sounds like indie folk more often than he sounds like top 40 Nashville. The album, I think, is pretty like, what you hear is what you get. Like, it sounds like a band playing, like it sounds like what you're going to hear at a Zach Bryan show. Um, and I think the acoustic album is cool. I'm a big fan of getting acoustic versions of songs. I think it's really nice that you do get to hear these songs with just an acoustic guitar and vocals. I think, you know, I mean, to his credit, I guess, like, guy can write a song. If for some reason I mean, it's not, like, overproduced to me is like, it's not that, but it does have these embellishments. It has strings and horns and like these kind of more layered things. If you want to just hear the songs without any of that, like, yes, the acoustic version proves guy can write a song. He maybe could use an editor. I think there's no real lulls on the record, but 25 songs that aren't super different, it's a lot. I think like maybe the best 12 would have just been a tighter record. Anyway, I think that, he released the acoustic version for the wrong reasons. I wish he wasn't doing it in this, like, if you're going to call my album overproduced, well, then get this. Like, if you're going to do the arrangements, just own it that you're doing it, I think. Like, that's the record you wanted to make. Like, to come out with this kind of self-conscious, like, oh, in case you're going to hate on it, here's this. I think he's doing it for the wrong reasons. But I do think that the record is good. The acoustic versions are good. It's cool to have them. I don't think the album's overproduced. I don't think Zach needs to worry so much.
I kind of agreed with his overproduced line when I first put on the new album. And I have been for the past few years pretty obsessed with previous Zach Bryan albums, including the last one. And so, yeah, that was just 2020. It's been 2024. Um, when did that come out in 2024? Do you remember?
Yeah, July 4th.
Oh, okay. Yeah, there you go. So it was like a year and a half because this one came out like second week of January.
Mhm.
But he put out a live album in between there as well. The live album also 25 tracks. I did see him live a year or two ago, long show, not too long, just, you know, not surprised. Well, actually the live album though was a compilation. He he like mixed in certain songs from different cities, including from actually no, I don't know. Anyway, I don't know if there was the ones from the when I was at. And then yeah, the 2024 album, Great American Bar Scene, 19 tracks. 2023 album, it was only 16 tracks.
That was his shortest one, yeah.
Yeah,
The American Heartbreak from before that, which was, I think, a lot of people's first, like, kinda introduction to him. I mean, kinda it was his first major label album. That had, like,
34.
yeah, insane. And then I think he
Yes.
also put out, like, a 9-song EP that same year or the next year, but I'm like, the EP is, some artists' full length, you know? Like, yeah, he can write a song and he keeps doing it. Um,
But it works too. And as somebody who wouldn't have expected to get obsessed with an artist who can play multiple nights at MetLife Stadium and who puts out 25, 30 song albums, I did. So, and have I been listening to this new one over and over? Not always in one sitting. Yes. Did I listen to all 50 songs acoustic followed by the new album in one day the other day? Yes. So somehow it works. Morgan Wallen, who I don't listen to in 2025, got a lot of flack for releasing a 37 song album. Maybe he was inspired by Zach Bryan. I don't know.
I feel like it's, like, just a mainstream thing too, like, rappers do it, but I do, but even that being said, like, well, Zach tacking the original version onto the acoustic version, like, that's for sure, like, a major label artist thing. Like, I mean, nobody in the indie world is doing that. It's a streaming service thing. Um, but, like, I don't get the sense that Zach is making long records just to get more streams. I really think he just, like, writes a bunch of songs and just cannot seem to edit himself and thinks and then would rather just release them all, which I appreciate. That's cool. Like, I do respect it. Um, Still a part of me that thinks, like, a really tight 12 to 15 song album would just be, like, a little easier to consider a great album, and then you release, you know, the acoustic versions and the outtakes later, and then we get more, and that's exciting. But whatever, you know, everybody's doing the what is even an album in 2026, right? Blah 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 blah. We're tired of this conversation, so who cares? Some people do, like, don't even just do EPs and singles now, and then other people like Zach Bryan make 34-song albums. Whatever,
Yeah.
who
Well,
cares?
the fans are partially to blame at his bravery for doing this stuff. The acoustic songs, which have only been out for a few days, range from like 400,000 to 200,000 plays each already just on Spotify. So
Hmm.
basically, but then the real versions, oh, I guess they're not. Well, for him, they're low. The real versions are already ranging from like 2 to 6 million each. It's there's one at 8 million. Yeah, so he can do such crazy things and see success with that. Yeah, I think a small artist might really hurt themselves with a move
Hmm.
like this, is what I'm trying to say. I was saying when I first heard the new album, so I was like trying to say, like, I'm a fan. And I heard the new album and I was kind of like, I think this is the first. Now, maybe I'm like over it because Zach, he's obviously always writing a lot of new lyrics and that's a big part of his music. But you listen, it's also a lot of this. You could argue musically, a lot of the tracks are a lot of the same, and so especially when it's like you said, 25 in a row, and so then you've now got like 100 songs in 3 to 4 albums, and on first listen, I was like, well, this is more of the same, but this, I don't know what overproduced really means as much as like you have more of a something in your mind for that. But I was like, you know what, maybe this is a little overproduced or so. And it's not sticking with me. This might be the first Zach Bryan album in the past 3 or 4 that I don't love. But actually, then the acoustic came out. I listened to it. I loved it on first listen. And then, but already just in like a week, I'm so used to the new album. I don't even think of it as overproduced anymore. Now I like it. So there were a few things on there. I'm like, this is the exact part of a song that's already popular. This and now I'm just like, yeah, I'm already listening to the new album. It's just in rotation. There's a lot of songs that feel like hits already on it. I have no major criticisms anymore. I guess it just takes a little getting used to.
Yeah, I think it, to your point, like he's got a very distinct style. I definitely think a lot of his songs sound very similar on the surface. And the first listen for me, I was also like, okay, like, especially because you kind of have a few records like this already and it's so long. I was a little bit like, okay. But then, yeah, the songs are strong. And the more I listen, the more like you said, they feel like new hits. And I've already got a handful of favorites. I love Bad News, the song where he mentions ice. Um, I really like Cannonball a lot, which I think I read is like potentially about his mother, but it's just whoever it's, songs are up for interpretation. Whatever it's about, it's really powerful, emotional song. Yeah, so many good ones. Slick Back feels like a instant fan favorite. A lot of good stuff on there.
I think Slicked Back is going to be a hit for sure.
I do like that he released it with no singles because you kind of just have to pick your own, and it earns like the songs are good enough that, yeah, give it a few listens, figure out your favorites. I think that's ultimately his point too with just releasing every song. Is I think he might have even said in an interview at one point, like, you know like with some artists would have these B-sides and then it would be somebody's favorite song. So I think he was like, why have to be a B-side? Why not just release all the songs and everyone's going to be somebody's favorite? And like, it's true. So maybe my favorite songs on the record would have been cut, so maybe I can't even say it should have been shorter.
Definitely. And yeah, when I say I imagine them as hits, I am back like seeing him live at Barclays Center in my mind. And the place was singing along to every single song, like the whole arena, whole stadiums, everybody's singing along at Zach Bryan show. So I have that like image in my head and I'm like, oh yeah, no, this one definitely. Um,
Hmm.
anyway, speaking of artists that could play arenas, although we are definitely wondering if she will or not. Big news this morning is Mitski is back.
Finally, we hoped on our anticipated albums episode, and now a couple weeks later, it's real. Mitski's new album is called Nothing's About to Happen to Me. It comes out on February 27th on Dead Oceans. She made it with her longtime collaborator, Patrick Hyland, who's been her, like, I think, main collaborator on all the Mitski records that most people listen to. Maybe not like the very early ones. And the first single is called Where's My Phone? It was like she put out a bunch of teasers. I'm sure if you're a Mitski fan, you've seen all that. And I love it. It just feels like yet again Mitski's doing it. It's like the song started out as sort of this like fuzzed out indie rock song, and at first I was a little bit like, okay, like feels like a big comeback single just because it's been a minute. And then this song is like maybe not as jumping out at you as you might want when it's been so long. And then towards the end of the song, it goes in all these kind of whimsical Baroque pop kind of create like unexpected directions that definitely also match the vibe of the video and sort of the artwork and photography that she's been having accompanying this new album. And yeah, I listened to it like 3 times in a row the first time I heard it. I love when it gets weird towards the end. I just can't wait to hear the rest of this record. Apparently, it's some of the members of her touring band that were in her recent live film and live album, The Land, play on this. There's an orchestra on it. Can't wait to hear what she does.
People are saying there are visual similarities to Bjork in her look in the new
Okay.
photos and things.
It's funny because there's like a cabaret kind of feel. So like I mean, I guess, you can try that to whoever, but like rock wise, I was like, it's like Panic at the Disco or Dresden Dolls or something. But then also she's wearing this like cabaret, like mask thing, but she's sitting at like an old school, like 90s Dell keyboard. So it's like there's kind of multiple things happening at once. Like it feels like she's kind of like it's surreal because it's all these like kind of different eras and like technological periods combined, and it's like both nostalgic and futuristic, and yeah. Meanwhile, there is just so much good music released this week. It feels like this was maybe the first kind of like big news push of the year musically. And I think we'll just run through a few later. But real quick, I also want to bring up before we kind of get to our Bob Weir segment is that Poison the Well, the influential melodic metalcore band, announced their first album in 17 years. It's called Peace and Place. The new single Thoroughbreds is awesome. We actually talked more about this on our anticipated metal episode. It was a bonus episode that went live earlier this week. But in case you didn't check that out, um, I just want to mention that because I'm really excited for this Poison the Well record. I think the single is, it's really like for a band who's been gone for so long, it's really strong. Brooklyn Vegan has an exclusive solid gold vinyl variant. That's in quotes. It's not made of solid gold. That's the name of the color, but it's in our store online, shop.brooklynvegan.com. But yeah, that's one of the many, many, many great songs that came out this week. One is also Kim Gordon's new song. And actually, instead of me talking more about that, that comes up when we talk to Lee Ranaldo, who of Sonic Youth, who joined us on this show to help us pay tribute to Bob Weir of the Grateful Dead, who sadly passed away at 78 years old this week. Bob was the last surviving lead vocalist of the Dead. Phil Lesh passed away 2 years ago. Obviously, Jerry Garcia passed away in the 90s. And Bob especially really helped. I mean, all of the surviving members and then like other sort of adjacent Dead musicians have just helped keep the band alive in the 30 years since Jerry's death. But Bob, especially by leading Dead and Company, I mean, basically turned the Dead back into a stadium band. I think there's probably a lot of people who have frequented Dead and Company shows and were way too young to have seen the Grateful Dead. I mean, I'm too young to have seen the Grateful Dead. You saw them once.
Yes.
How was that experience for you? When was that?
That was great.
Was that in the early 90s or?
Yeah, I was in the 90s. I don't remember exactly, but
Well, if you
Bob
remember,
Dylan
you
opened.
weren't there. Oh, right, the Dylan Dead tour, yeah, or one of maybe there
One
were
of them.
two,
Yeah,
right?
there
Because
was
they
more
did
than
an
one.
album, but that was maybe, but yeah, how I'm
It
very,
was at, I mean, was it a Giant Stadium, which is now MetLife Stadium? Something like that. And I remember Dylan playing to like a 3/4 empty or a very empty seeming giant place. Everyone's in the parking lot doing nitrous balloons and whatnot until Grateful Dead went on, and it was good. The parking lot scene was a big part of it for me at the time. It was just so cool to experience. And that was a big part of Dead shows in general, the parking lot.
mm, yeah,
And everybody selling their grilled cheeses out of, and various wares and weed and so, so yeah, I was happy to have been able to do that.
yeah, that's amazing. I mean, I will say this again later on this episode, spoiler, but yeah, I've seen a handful of Dead bands, like Dead iterations, never the real thing because again, I was a few years old when Jerry died. Um, but they really were just they never ended, even though they broke up. And I have a feeling that they're not going to end, even without Bob Weir. We still have Mickey Hart and Bill Kreutzmann, and they're probably going to find plenty of ways to do something. And then, the thing about the Dead is it's like, it feels like like I said, so many other musicians have been in these other Dead bands. Like, I mean, obviously you have bands like Fish, and Trey Anastasio from Fish has played with various Dead bands. But then even that, even aside from that, you have like Phil Lesh was leading his band Phil Lesh and Friends, and all these musicians played with him. And it's like, he would kind of show them the way of the Dead. And now they know the way of the Dead and they can carry it on, pass it on to other people. Something Lee touches on when we talk to him is, members of the National ended up being kind of like core Bob Weir collaborators towards the end of his life. So we've got, and they put out that big Day of the Dead tribute album 10 years ago now that Lee is also on, with all these great indie musicians playing Dead songs like Perfume Genius and The War on Drugs and, Courtney
Wilco.
Barnett, and the list goes on. But there's just so many ways that the Dead can continue to exist even without Bob Weir. But even that being said, the passing of Bob Weir is for sure a major milestone in Dead history. You know, it's end of an era, um, and his contributions to the band were so important. If you didn't know this, I mean, he's the youngest member of the band. He was for many years kind of taken less seriously, especially less seriously than Jerry. He kind of got the nickname the Other One, partially because of the song called that, but also because he wasn't Jerry. And um, and then sometimes he could be the butt of jokes, even from Deadheads, and but without there's no Grateful Dead without Bob Weir, and as Lee says, the past sort of like 30 years or so since Jerry, I mean, Bob Weir has even more become this important person who's carried on like just the legacy of the band. And I think if we didn't have Bob doing Dead and Company and all these other bands he's done, and of course Phil Lesh doing all his bands, like it might be a different, like maybe they would seem like less of a force in the present day than they do. So, so many things we can say about Bob Weir, but what we decided to do was bring in a massive Deadhead, or at least Dead fan, a lifelong Grateful Dead fan, someone who saw them in the early 70s, was at the legendary Cornell show, went on to form the incredible Sonic Youth, a band who, even if you don't think it, have a lot of parallels to the Dead. And that is, as we've said, Lee Ranaldo. Really, really was awesome to talk to him about Bob Weir, about the Grateful Dead. And while he was here, he told us some of what he's got coming up. He told us a little bit about the teaser that Sonic Youth put out last year, and like I said, he talked to us about Kim Gordon's new solo record. So that was also a real treat. It was great to have Lee on, and here's our conversation with Lee. Hey Lee, welcome to BV Weekly.
Nice to be here.
Nice to have you.
Yeah, welcome, Lee.
So we're talking about Bob Weir, obviously.
Yeah.
The legendary Grateful Dead member. He passed away this week. I mean, where do we begin with Bob Weir?
It's hard to figure out where to begin. I was kind of thinking about this last night. I've been thinking a lot about Bob and my relation to the band and all this other stuff. And it's funny because when Jerry Garcia died in 1995, I think, especially for people outside of the serious orbit of the band, he was the figurehead of the band. I mean, he was the figurehead of the band, but I think a lot of people thought of the Grateful Dead as Garcia and a bunch of other guys, and the outpouring of love for him at that time was just so profound in a way that he had touched so many people's lives. And I've experienced a similar thing these last days since Bob passed, especially since it seemed so unexpected. He seemed like so vibrant and healthy, but it seemed like I was thinking that it actually took another 35 years or 30 years or something for him to gain the same kind of respect and recognition that Garcia had when he died. And I mean, he was indelibly just as much a part of the band, that something that made that band what it was, especially sharing lead vocal duties for the most part, just him and Jerry. And he was always the younger kid, and I think looked on as the younger kid. And I think the last 30 years, just him sort of soldiering on, carrying on the band's music, and when in a certain way, kind of launching it into the future. I mean, I think with him gone, I mean, there must be something magical about sitting in the drum seat for the Grateful Dead, because those two guys are the last men standing at this point, Billy and Mickey. But and I'm sure they'll carry on. But I think at this point, part of the it seems to me like part of the reason for Dead and Company and Further and everything that happened since Jerry passed, part of the reason for them existing is really just to solidify this catalog of music as one of the great American music catalogs of the 20th century, really. And I think that Bob has helped kind of like launch those songs out into the world, in an even broader way than just within the Grateful Dead's community.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really interesting, because I was born in 1991, so I've seen a handful of Dead shows, but they've all been without Jerry. They've been these various iterations of the Dead that have existed, and so it's fast because I feel like I've seen the band multiple times, and it's just kind of fascinating how like they've lived on, like they've felt like current music for generation after generation, even after Jerry died and the band like officially broke up.
Yeah, that's kind of the legacy of that music, and even in a certain way, the kind of the community they created and the style of their attitude towards their shows and towards their playing. The way they played their shows, and it really didn't occur to me at the time that their music would live on in that sense beyond the legacy of just the band members. But it seems pretty clear at this point that it will. Um, I came to the Dead. I came to the Dead in my early teenage years in the early '70s, and I saw them a lot in the '70s, and I saw Garcia's band a lot, and I saw Kingfish, um, and that music really helped shape me in so many ways. But once I moved to New York, and especially once punk and new wave hit, I kind of put it aside for a long period of time, and like moved on to other things. It really wasn't until the early 2000s. Uh, some website asked me to go and watch this movie that they had just released, which was called Sunshine Daydream, the Veneta, Oregon show from the early '70s. And it was kind of amazing to be in this room in this theater with all these, you know, fans of the band and watching this really vintage movie of them. And it really just kind of slowly started all of that music seeping back into my life, and realizing that in some ways the aspects of it had never left my my consciousness, I guess you would say. One thing I always loved about the Dead was that they were a band that sort of seemed equally comfortable playing songs and playing like super out there, jam extrapolations, just getting really lost in sound, and having this ability to have, like, a bunch of, three different, three or four different front people singing songs. They weren't a band with a single lead singer and a bunch of members behind. They were really this kind of community, even on stage, and various aspects of those qualities. Um, I found I always looked for stuff like that in music. I think I was thinking about a band like Television, where Verlaine and Richard Lloyd, Tom Verlaine and Richard Lloyd had this kind of similar kind of interplay, and they were also a band that was really comfortable uh, playing concise songs and playing like long drawn out, more sound sculpture kind of music. And I always felt there were aspects of that in Sonic Youth as well, where we loved to play songs, but we also loved to get really out there and uh, you know, lost in worlds of sound. And although we never sounded anything like the Dead, I always found some parallels there. Three singers across the front line, and the ability, like I just said, to play songs and to play just kind of more pure music. Um, so there were always a lot of connections to me, even beyond just the way their songs sounded or the kind of jamming that they did.
Yeah, for sure. I mean,
And for me, Weir was always a really big part of that. I mean, obviously, everyone uh, genuflects to Jerry, and he was such a charismatic guy and such a uh, you know such an amazing talker in a way. I mean, he always had profound things to say. But to me, when I listened to the band, I mean, Weir's element, and especially things I took from his style of guitar playing, voicing all these strange chords and almost being like an entwined rhythm and lead with Garcia's playing. I mean, there's definitely points in a lot of songs where uh, Weir's playing the lead and Garcia's playing the rhythm, and they're just kind of going back and forth in this beautiful way. And um, you know, Verlaine and Lloyd did that for just one example from that period, and I think that we did that in Sonic Youth a lot, where even between the three of us, it was never clear from song to song who was playing the chords and who was playing the sort of more melodic lines and things like that. Um, so his approach to the instrument uh, just really always stayed with me in terms of, especially because in Sonic Youth we were playing in all these strange tunings, so you couldn't help but be looking for chord voicings and different ways to to get out certain kind of harmonic sounds. And Weir was kind of a master of that through his whole career.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I always think about how, like, like you said, people want to really focus so much on Jerry, but like when I think about what the Grateful Dead's sort of just the guitar melodies, the jams, the solos, all that stuff, what it really does for me, like it's, Jerry plus Bobby plus Phil. It's like you don't really have it if it's just Jerry and then
Yeah,
other people who aren't on that wavelength. And I get the same thing from Sonic Youth. I feel like it's like you can't just have Lee Ranaldo or Thurston Moore or Kim Gordon. You have to have all three, and then you get that thing, that.
yeah. It's the sum is greater than the parts kind of idea.
Hmm.
I mean, I loved seeing Garcia's bands, and they were super powerful in their own right, but it was a very different territory that they covered than what the Dead could do, and that took all of them up there on stage, including the two drummers and whoever was playing keyboards at one time or another. Um, it really was. Some sort of a collective mindset that was much greater than the sum of its parts.
Yeah. And I wanted to ask you about something you said. You mentioned that you were into the Dead in the early 70s, and then you kind of found punk. And, it's interesting because obviously the Dead were kind of a hated band amongst punk and then later indie rock. And I think that's changed. But tell me, like, when you did kind of, you know, form Sonic Youth, kind of find your way into this alternative music space, was there pushback from people you knew against this band? Like, did you feel like you maybe had to fight to be a fan of them openly or to meet other people in punk and indie music that were Dead fans or Deadheads?
There wasn't really pushback. I mean, there may have been a little jocular ribbing within the band about it, but I think our band was so open to all influences that everyone acknowledged them as a certain kind of force for music. And Kim grew up on the West Coast, so um, life, love them or hate them, the Grateful Dead were part of that experience for her. And um, it wasn't so much that there was pushback as much as all of a sudden there was all this other music to pay attention to, and it didn't really, at least outwardly, have a lot to do with the music of San Francisco in that era. And so it was just, I think it was more just a matter of it was time to put away certain things and move on to other areas of music, especially given the fact that that was the moment when music for me went became more of a reality of like this is something that I could do rather than like this is a hobby. It's something you play in your bedroom or your dorm room or whatever. Suddenly, we had a band that could actually go out and play shows and consider trying to make a go of it in a sense. And the music that was inspiring us at that time was what was happening from 1977 on. There were so many amazing new things to grab hold of, and so it wasn't so much a question of leaving their music behind. It just kind of putting it aside for a while. I mean, I moved to New York in '79 officially, and it was kind of around the same time that my interest in what the Dead were doing live was starting to wane a little bit. I mean, I had seen so many great shows through the '70s, there were just suddenly so many other interesting things to focus on that it just sort of went in the background for a while. And I think I only saw them once or twice after 1980. Um, and I don't know, my mind was in a different place at that point in terms of what I was listening to. But like I say, watching that Veneta concert in like 2004 or something, uh, it's such a beautiful concert, and it's them at the pure kind of height of their power, like their early 70s, and just hearing all those songs, that kind of the songs never really went away. I mean, the songs are just as much a part of the American songbook as like the way we today consider the basement tapes. That's this pile of songs relating to old America, but made new by these new players. Dylan and the band, and the Dead songbook. We got to mention Robert Hunter as well here, and John Barlow. Um, their songbook is kind of equal stature in terms of it being this true like late century American music. So it just slowly all started to seep back in for me, and it's really started with just remembering how wonderful those songs are and how incredible the lyrics are and how deep a lot of them are on some levels.
Yeah, I mean, I fully agree with you about the songbook because I think, I think the dead haters or maybe dead, doubters,
Yeah,
sometimes will be like, oh, like they're just like these 20-minute jams, and it's like, well, no, I mean, they're also great songwriters. And since we are talking about Bob Weir, and obviously Jerry wrote a lot of the band's most well-known songs, but so did Bob.
yeah.
What's your favorite Bob Weir song, or some of your favorites?
There's so many. I really appreciated that he was the voice of sort of the Cowboys type songs in their group, or one of the voices, like for a song like Me and My Uncle, or El Paso. The fact that he was putting those songs out, but he was putting them out right alongside, a sort of homage kind of song like Mexicali Blues or Greatest Story Ever Told. They sort of wore their Western outlaw image, the cowboy image on their sleeve to some degree, but they really kind of embodied this notion of kind of these modern day outlaws, with the way they toured around and um, kind of almost lived outside of the laws to some degree. Um, but Sugar Magnolia is a big one. I mean, Jack Straw, I think, is to me one of my most favorite Bob songs, and especially because it's a song about kind of Western outlaws, but as personified by not just Bob, but Bob and Jerry, kind of having this conversation in the song together, and uh, that song always just sends chills up my spine when I hear it. Playing in the band. I mean, he wrote he wrote so many great songs in their canon. I mean, certainly overshadowed by Garcia Hunter compositions for a lot of people, anyway. But um, I think the Dead would have been a lesser idea without his songs, because they were different. They were more complicated in some ways, or brought in different elements, and they really balanced nicely with the kind of thing that Jerry wrote, which was more sort of blues based and um, in some cases even bluegrass based or whatever. But Estimated Profit, Throwing Stones. I was listening this morning um, to this song off his last solo record, um, called that Blue Mountain. Is that what it's called? I think that song called Only a River, which I wasn't that familiar with that record, although a lot of friends of mine helped him make that record. The guys from the National and Josh Kaufman and people like that. Um, but there's a song on that record, Only a River, that Dylan covered like a year ago or something like that, a year and a half ago or something. And I wasn't familiar with the song. It's from Dylan's version. Uh, I went back to listen to that record, and there's he didn't make a lot of studio records, but there's some really nice stuff on that record, kind of supported by a younger cast of devotees in a sense, which I found really kind of nice. So, I mean, there's the Weather Report Suite was a big one for me. I mean, I loved that record. I loved almost every song on Wake of the Flood, and I just remember I was in college when that record came out, and I spent I spent weeks trying to figure out how to play that song. That intricate guitar part in the first section, um, and felt like it was really rewarding music and really rewarding to kind of learn how to play that. And um, I always look forward to his songs in the Dead sets, because they balanced out whatever Garcia was doing with a little bit more rock and roll kind of stuff. If he was doing Promised Land or One More Saturday Night or whatever. I always think about that Ace record, which I dearly love that record, and it's obviously a Grateful Dead record in all but name. And I always thought that was so cool that a member of the band busts out to make a solo record, but just uses all of his bandmates as the backing band. Um, there was a period when I thought I should have done something similar to that in Sonic Youth and made an entire record of me singing, but with the same personnel as the band. But never got around to that. But I always thought that was a great idea, and that record is just incredible.
Yeah, it was always interesting to me to when I first found Ace and realized, oh, I know all these songs just from like Europe '72 and stuff like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, they were staples in their set, forever. Looks Like Rain. I mean, what an amazing ballad that one is. Really, just incredible song.
I do think, and I wrote this on Brooklyn Vegan while kind of paying tribute to Bob, but like, a lot of I love Ace. A lot of the songs on Ace, I think I like even more at when you like the Dead live recordings. But Cassidy, I think, is in its best form
Yeah,
on Ace.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's another one from that record that is just completely great. But in a way, you could almost say that with all of their songs in their catalog, that like seeing them play those songs live is really what made it. And it's why they made so many live albums of original songs. I mean, they didn't need to. They shone best in the live arena in a sense. And it's another thing that I actually always wanted Sonic Youth to do, was write a new record of songs and record them live instead of in the studio. And um, I mean, we did little touches of that. We never made a whole record like that, but I always loved that about, yeah, like a record like Europe '72. Uh, triple record with like at least three sides of brand new material that never saw studio treatment. It was just like, we wrote these songs, we're playing them live, and that's where they belong. And um, you know, they were lifers. They were lifers at what they did, in the same way that Dylan is today. It's just like they're out there playing their songs, and it seemed like with Bob, especially after the Dead ceased with Jerry's passing, um, you could find him doing playing in so many different ensembles, like playing with the guys from the National, or playing with the Wolf Brothers, or playing with Phil, or with John Mayer of all people. And it seemed like that was the life he took under his took up at 16 or 17, and really with this kind of focused dedication of not of there not being anything better to do, than be on stage singing songs for people
Yeah. And yeah, I
and
mean,
gathering
speaking
that
of,
community, you know?
yeah. Speaking of the National, I mean, I think one of the really pivotal things for me was that Day of the Dead compilation that the National helped put
Yeah,
together. You were on that. All
yeah,
these great indie rock artists covering these Dead songs. And, like I kind of said earlier, like, I'm glad you said you didn't really feel pushback, but I remember getting into kind of finding the indie rock world, also the punk world, meeting a lot of people who just looked down on the Dead. And I felt like that compilation really helped flip the script a lot, because it was like, hey, all these musicians that you like, they're just playing these songs, and you can just tell they're great songs because you like the voice singing them or whatever it is. But my question for you though is, Why do you think the Dead did get that kind of pushback from indie rock fans, punk fans, and what would you tell someone who's listening right now who still is kind of like, I don't listen, I don't like the Grateful Dead?
So to backtrack a second, there's certainly I was saying within Sonic Youth there wasn't a lot of pushback, but there was definitely a lot of pushback in the greater world of punk and new wave to bands like the Grateful Dead, just because they epitomized uh, everything that new wave and punk wasn't. You know, the economy of song, the short, sharp solo. You know, 3 minutes back to kind of like a 3 or 4 minute song, like hit him hard and get out and go on to the next one. And they were not that, and so there was a lot of pushback uh, on their style. You know, and and in a way, you know, their style looks back to, like, you know, free jazz from the 50s and 60s as much as many other things. Bluegrass, there's a million things being drawn together and threaded into the same chord in their style. But I don't think that the punk and new wave fans that came around, like, sort of turn of the 80s, were interested in that. They were interested in these sharp, short songs, and I was too at that time, you know. And so the idea of like 20-minute jams just was not, unless you were Verlaine and Lloyd, really. It was, or Sonic Youth maybe, but it was really not what people were interested in for a while. And you know, I long ago gave up trying to convince anybody about the worth of the Grateful Dead music, because it's as they used to say, you're either on the bus or you're off the bus. You either get it or you don't get it. And if you don't get it, that's completely fine. There's so much beautiful music to listen to. But if you get it, you kind of get it in a very profound way, you know. I've been commiserating with certain friends of mine and certain old friends of mine that we go back a long way, and we're really have a deep love for the Dead. And you know, when you get it and you're inside their catalog, those songs, they just mean so much to you, and they delineate like places in your life, like where you were when you first heard American Beauty, or you know, whatever, things like that. You know, um, Dark Star and the Live Dead record, or whatever. Um, so you know, some people come around to it. Some people get it the first time they hear it. Some people never get it. That's all fine as far as I'm concerned.
What you said about you get it or you don't, it's kind of like punk in that way.
Yeah, very much like that. You know, I mean, a lot of people in the turn of the '80s did not get what was going on with you know, whoever it was, the Ramones or Richard Hell, or even Talking Heads, although they really garnered a huge audience eventually. Um, you know, you either got it or you didn't. You know, and that's that's where it was at. You know, I sort of feel sorry for people that never found anything of worth in the Grateful Dead's music, because it's so broad. I mean, their music, you know, it goes from something like Old and in the Way to something like Chiefstones. You know, I mean, like the stretch of of ground that they covered was really vast. And you know that there was another parallel with Sonic Youth, in that uh, our band was always about inclusion. Like, we almost never hated any music. You know, we kind of tried to understand and bring in aspects of all the different musics that we loved. And between the four of us, or five of us, we were always into different kinds of music. But we always wanted to bring more music into the picture and have more music be available for influence to us, whether it was, you know, Louie Louie or Stockhausen, or anything in between. And you know, I mean, the Beatles are kind of a classic example of a band like that. You know, again, three singers across the front. You know, really, you couldn't. They're not a band where the only person you can name is the lead singer. I mean, they were really this band, and that was always my criteria for what makes a band. Is like, can you name anybody besides the singer? If you can, they're really a band. and you only know it's like Mick Jagger and a bunch of other guys, and or not. Obviously, you can name everybody in that band. But getting back to that Day of the Dead record, for me, that was such an incredible moment because it was almost like all these more modern musicians came out of the shadows as secret Dead lovers. And there's so many great uh, great renditions on that sprawling record. I was really happy to be a part of it, but there were so many songs on that record that just kind of surprised me. Like Bonnie Prince Billy doing Reuben and Charisse, or Fucked Up doing Cream Puff War, or it's like all these different interpretations of like people latching on to different aspects of the Grateful Dead, from their most sort of bucolic to their early speed freak days or whatever. And it was just a wonderful moment to see all those versions of those songs. And again, like, this is people interpreting their catalog, and that was also another step in this process. I mean, people have been out there singing the Dead songs forever. Some people have made whole careers out of it practically. But I think the more interesting thing is just the fact that those songs will seep their way into the American songbook, as uh, every bit as much as Stephen Foster or whoever down through the years. It's just like people will continue to sing those songs for a really long time, and I think that's um, maybe the best part of their legacy, that it outlives just the various members in the band, that they put it together and launched it, but now it's out into the world, and those songs are filtering into people all over the world, and continue to be heard for a long time. And it goes without saying, we've got plenty of recorded Grateful Dead material to listen to. I mean, that's another kind of amazing thing, is just how many tapes there are of documents of their shows. And in my early days, I was a collector of those tapes, and now there's plenty of their own music to listen to if you want to hear their stylings at any different point in their career.
Do you have a favorite show?
Um, well, I was at that Barton Hall show in Cornell in 1977 that people always consider one of their most special shows. Um, I really love that show. I saw a lot of shows by them, and I don't really have a favorite one. I like different aspects of different shows throughout the time I was going to see them. Um, but that one kind of stands out in part just because it was so famous. Uh, I went to school in Binghamton, New York, at Harper College, and a couple of years before I got there, they played another really well-known, famous show where they played in the Harper Social Room or whatever, and they did an acoustic set and two electric sets, and it was just a bit before my time, but I know that was another legendary show that people often talked about with them. And I went to those. I went with my buddies to those Fare Thee Well concerts in Chicago, um, and that was a kind of a nice. Those were that was the only series of Dead shows where I was there for the whole run. I know people would always do that. They'd go and be at every night of a run, and I never had the option to do that before, but I was at all three of those shows, and uh, again, just like the feeling of being in their crowd, and I saw Dead and Company at the Sphere a couple of years ago with my buddies as well, and I have to say that the crowd at their shows is a really special audience. I mean, uh, there's something so benign about their crowd and so open that uh, I remember feeling that both at the shows in Chicago and and in the Sphere as well. That just um, their crowd was a really special audience.
Awesome.
You have any favorite modern bands that are carrying the torch?
Um, I don't know directly. I mean, I know there's a lot of, sort of bands doing sort of Dead covers, and that's not, I don't think that's what you're talking about. In a certain way, I always thought Pavement had a good dollop of Grateful Dead music in their style for some reason, even though they don't sound anything like the Grateful Dead. Um, I don't know about modern bands that I would cite that aren't sort of blatant cover bands right this
Right,
second off
right.
the top of my head. But I just thought, the other thing about Bobby in particular is, Jerry was a very eloquent talker and would talk really in a profound way about almost anything. I mean, you could engage, from what I see from interviews, you could engage Jerry on almost any topic, and he could talk with wit and wisdom. And Bob always kind of talked in these kind of aphorisms and kind of like uh, I don't know. I always felt that there was a lot unsaid behind what Bobby said in interviews. He seemed like a very open person, and no doubt he was. But I always felt like there was another side of him that was rarely revealed in interviews, like sort of a guarded private life to him that was not as openly revealed. He was great with the quip, like more fun than a frog in a glass of milk, and that kind of thing. But I don't know. I think there's a lot of mystery around his character and his kind of humble, you know, standing behind Garcia without too much ego about that. Not really any kind of competitive streak about that. Just like he was really good in the role of kind of supportive second lieutenant kind of thing in the band. And I don't know. I just feel like there's still a lot about him that I don't know after having listened to him talk a lot and watching him play a lot. And I think that's an achievement for an artist of any style that's been around a long time is to maintain a certain air of mystery about certain aspects of your life or your work that um, you don't want to explain everything out in the open. You want to keep some stuff a uh, little bit more private, I guess. Uh, that kind of continues to make him a fascinating figure.
Well, I think that's a really good note to end on. But I've got one more non Grateful Dead question for you since you're here. Uh,
Okay.
our podcast, BV Weekly, it's a weekly podcast where we talk about the week in music news. And one of the other big things this week, actually, is that Kim Gordon just announced her new solo record. Have you heard her new single, or do you keep up with her solo records?
Yeah, I've heard the whole album, and I really loved the last one so much, and this one sounds really good too. She's definitely on this role. She's found musical collaborators that seem to be really simpatico with her style, and yeah, I saw that they announced the single, and yeah, she sent me the album like I don't know, a month or two ago, and so we've been listening to it here, and it's great to see her out there. She's got some of our old crew guys touring with her and kind of carrying it on, and it's very exciting.
I really loved that last album too. And it's just interesting because it's so different than what she was doing in Sonic Youth. Like having played with her for so long, seeing the kind of music she writes, what was your reaction? Did you kind of know, oh, I know always knew Kim had this in her, or were you even surprised that Kim pulled something like that last record off?
She's since we stopped, she's kind of uh, found these collaborators to work with, but I would say I didn't feel like, oh, this is so different from Sonic Youth. The musical backing is different for sure, and it's constructed in a completely different way. But uh, in so many ways, it still feels like Kim's music, and obviously Kim's singing and guitar playing. Uh, I felt like it was a really interesting extension of her work in Sonic Youth. I thought it was interesting that I don't know in the first bunch of years after Sonic Youth, she put out like Murdered Out and, some singles that were starting to move in this direction of like working with someone who was a real sort of studio denizen. And at the same time, I was working with this guy from Barcelona called Raul Refri, who had worked with Rosalia and done a bunch of things, and he was pushing my record in a new a new area as well, especially that record called Names of North End Women, which we were really trying more studio centric type stuff. And uh, I always felt with her records that the music sounded different, but they still sounded so much like Kin that I could see the line of continuity, and I felt like in some way I was going through something very similar at that point in time.
Yeah.
But and you carry your point of view and your sensibility along with you. So I think whatever she does, musically or artistically, visual art wise, or in terms of writing, it's always Kim behind it, and recognizes kind of through line.
I think that's another kind of Sonic Youth Grateful Dead parallel too, where the band's now been broken up for I think 15 years, but it feels like it still goes on. And there's all these other records from you and Kim and Thurston and Steve. And I know you jammed with Thurston and Steve, I think a year ago at a show.
Yeah.
Like, so it's like there's all these little iterations. Do you think we ever get our Sonic Youth Fare Thee Well?
Well, you guys are teasing something. Yeah, you teased something at the end of last year.
Yeah, we did. There's no talk of fare thee well kind of thing, but it is true that, I mean, the Dead's career ended for a different reason, the passing of Jerry. Um, but it's true that the rest of the band went on to continue doing things, and I find this to be a really wonderful time since I mean Sonic Youth was together 30 years. You can't really ask for a whole lot more than 30 years of a career for a band. I mean that's kind of remarkable that a weirdo band like us lasted that long to begin with. But since then, there's been so much new music from all of us, and we've each had a chance to flex kind of a bit more individuality, which I think it's been also kind of a pretty special period. Even if, as we were saying before, it doesn't add up to the collective whole of what Sonic Youth was, but it just continues all these different tangents and offshoots in a really great way. Um, so we're all still alive and kicking. So you never know. We did tease something, and we've got some releases coming up this year that we're really excited about. I'm not really even sure if I'm supposed to be talking about them yet or not, but there'll be something coming at Record Store Day that's kind of a teaser for a fall project.
I
And
think
yeah,
you and I were at the
it's
same.
around.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead, go ahead.
Oh no, I'm going back to the newer band theme. And no, that's awesome. Looking forward to whatever you guys do have coming, by the way. But
Yeah,
I was going to say, going back to newer band things, I think you and I were at the same Geese show a few months ago.
at the Paramount.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I noted.
when you ask that question, I mean, they're the new band that I'm most interested in right now. I mean, I really love their record, and I love Cameron Winter's record as well. And we saw him at Carnegie Hall a few weeks after that Geese show, and uh, I don't have any comparison there to make with the Dead, but just on a side note, I really loved both the Geese show and Cameron's Carnegie Hall solo, and I really have been wearing out those two records for sure. So they're a modern band that I really am interested in. Uh, I don't have a Grateful Dead
Oh
comparison
no,
there though.
didn't mean to go there. Didn't mean to go
Yeah,
there.
yeah, yeah,
Maybe.
yeah,
But yeah, we're
yeah.
also
But
huge fans.
that show was incredible at
I
the
agree.
Paramount.
That show was really incredible.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. Anything else to add, Lee?
Oh yeah, tell us more what you have going on, if there's anything coming up.
I'm spending the winter working on a new solo record, and I've been working with a lot of different collaborators. Usually, I put out a record with the Chicago guitarist Michael Valera a couple of months ago. That we're going to do some shows this year, and um, I've got I have a long-standing trio called Glacial with a bagpipe player from New Zealand called David Watson and a drummer called Tony Buck that's in that group, the Next. And we're going to do some European shows this year. I'm kind of laying low a little bit. I spent a lot of the last year doing some soundtrack work. I scored a couple of feature films and a short film, and I really enjoyed that work. So I'm trying to finish my next solo record through the winter this year. That's been kind of gestating for over a year now, and that's the main thing I've got going on the music side. And I'm doing some artwork and having some visual art shows as well. Thanks for asking.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Well, nice talking with you guys. This is,
Yeah.
it's a sad pleasure to be talking about Bob at this point. I really found his death so unexpected. I mean, I don't know if you guys saw any of those. He'd post these videos of his workout regime on tour where he's flinging these barbells, those one-sided barbells, and doing all this incredible exercise regime on tour. And like he seemed like a super healthy person, and it was
So
really,
in shape, yeah.
really shocking to me. Again, this is part of the mystery of Bob Weir to me. I mean, there seemed to be so many different sides. Like, did he do a lot of drugs? Was he clean? Like, there's all these different aspects that I've read many different reports on, and not really sure which is the heart of the matter. He went out singing. I think I saw some post the other day that his last song at his last show in August was "Touch of Grey," which I thought was just like, was that planned or was that just random? Did he know it was going to be his last show? I guess he'd already got his diagnosis at that point. And to end that show with, "Touch of Grey" with that chorus, "I will survive," which, people kind of like flashed on those lines when Jerry passed as well, because, he sang it originally. But to see that was Bob's last song at his last show was really touching, whether it was planned or whether it was just cosmic coincidence. All right, guys, have a good afternoon. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, really appreciate it. Thanks so much for coming by. I was just thinking, so Bob Weir just passed away. Phil Lesh, founding member also of the Grateful Dead, bassist, he passed, and who was also very active right until the end, passed away just October 2024. So just a year and a half ago, we have two less founding members of the Grateful Dead than we did a year and a half ago. And if I think even in Brooklyn Vegan terms, Brooklyn Vegan is now, we're like 21 years old as a site. So for at least 21 years, I can say that as part of my job and mission, we've been posting Grateful Dead tour dates, Grateful Dead news, and that included a lot of Phil Lesh headlines. Phil Lesh used to play regularly right here at the Cap since Peter Shapiro took over the Capitol Theater here in Westchester, and Bob Weir was always doing solo things. Bob Weir was obviously Dead & Co. Phil Lesh was not part of Dead & Co., but still played like 1 million shows a year. And sometimes
I think Phil especially would play like in San Francisco area and then New York. So like we were like his home away from home. Because he also did Brooklyn Bowl a lot, and he would do Central Park at least once a year, I think. So I feel like we as New Yorkers were spoiled. We got a lot of Phil Lesh. I think that Bob Weir toured more than Phil, like actually toured. But we were very grateful. We were very lucky and spoiled to have a lot of Phil Lesh here in New York.
Right. So all that is to say that all this, even at, maybe I'm not a Deadhead, but the Phil Lesh and Bob Weir and Dead & Co. shows were very on my radar. And even if I didn't go as often as I wish I did. Anyway, it's just interesting to think how we could have taken for granted that just 2 years ago, we could have seen Phil Lesh and Bob Weir and Dead & Co. so many times.
We're kind of saying goodbye to that really like first generation of rock music, you know, like it's there where the days are numbered for the sort of 60s rockers, and go see any of them, and 70s, you know, go see them, any of them if you can, because they're not making more of them.
Yeah, like Lee said, these were lifers who went out singing, and that's true for Phil and Bob and Jerry. But yeah, now 2026, that reality of a year and a half ago will never be true again.
Yeah.
T-
Well,
So,
well, I can't wait to see what Mickey and Billy come up with.
true.
Because it'll be something. And that's the thing about the Dead, right? Is it's like, I mean, I
What
don't
about
know.
John Mayer? He's still.
Yeah, John, right. I mean, honestly, I definitely wondered if there would just be like a John Dead and Co minus Bob Weir band with maybe a different name. Well, it'll be really interesting to see. I always really liked when Phil Lesh and friends had Warren Haynes playing guitar and singing. So I
Mm.
kind of wonder if like maybe like he could ramp up his Dead stuff. Like, you know, I mean, he's always doing a lot, but um I'm trying to think of what else would be cool, but
I
you know
think they
that
need to come out with, like you said, it's been 10 years since that Day of the Dead national
yeah, part 2.
compilation. Yeah, now's the time. Now's the
Yeah.
perfect time to do a part 2
Yeah,
on the
and get
10th
MJ
anniversary.
Lenderman on there.
Yes.
Um, I mean, one of my favorite moments on that is Kurt Vile and Jay Mascis doing "Box of Rain." So can we get like members of Phil Lesh and Friends or something fronted by Kurt Vile and Jay Mascis? Like that, like now we're talking, you know.
I'm
um,
down. I'm down.
but and yeah, I mean, just you know, just you talking about how so recently we had both Bobby and Phil, and now we don't. The Phil and Bobby tour, which happened after the Fairly Well shows, was really special. I caught that at Radio City. There were 2 nights, and I caught the one that had Trey Anastasio on guitar, which was like also extra special because, I mean, very few people, nobody can play like Jerry, but he comes close to understanding sort of how to. So, yeah, I feel very lucky to have seen the various Dead things I've seen, and I look forward to the next things because the music never stops. So we just have to plug a few more things because there's so much in this episode, but um, we just want to make sure that we kind of shout out some things. Normally we would be kind of like running through some new records, maybe reviewing some new songs and stuff, but we just are kind of out of time. So I just want to quickly go through like so much music came out this week. If you're looking for music to check out, there's an abundance. Elucid of Arm& Hammer already announced his next solo record just a couple months after that Arm& Hammer record. Woo Life, who are back, put out an 11-minute song. It's super epic. Flea announced his debut solo jazz record. Tom York sings on the new single. We got a second Converge song. This really cool UK slow chorus band Death Crash announced their new album. What else? So much. We said Kim Gordon, Shabaka, aka Shabaka Hutchings, kind of like he had just done that meditative ambient jazz flute thing. Now he's kind of back to like a livelier spiritual jazz thing. He announced a new record. We got album announcements from Sun, Robber, Alexis Taylor of Hot Chip, Jose Gonzalez, Fuckers, Arlo Parks, Cutworms, Holy Fuck, all the fuck bands, Tanya Tagak featuring Fucked Up Stamian Abraham on the new single.
Who also, as Lee just mentioned, sings
Yeah,
on
the
that
Dead. Yes.
the Dead comp.
And then, yeah, we've got a lot of record reviews up on brooklynvegan.com in both notable releases and Indie Basement, including the ASAP Rocky record we've been talking about. I think if you like Zach Bryan and especially like the non-overproduced, really somber, bare bones, folky side, then the Jana Horn record is up your alley and you should not miss that. I reviewed records from I Promise the World, Courtney Marie Andrews, the really beautiful ambient album from Juliana Barwick and Mary Lattimore, this UK punk band Rifle. Bill's got reviews up of Sleaford Mods, which also one of the guests on that record is Sue Tompkins of Life Without Buildings, and Life Without Buildings just announced their first show in 24 years. Huge, exciting news. Like we said, this week was the something of riches. But Crooked Man, Barry Adamson, and Shaking Hand are other artists that Bill reviews. And Dave, do you want to tell us just a few other headlines from the week before we go?
Well, just one thing. If you just listened to our last episode, which was completely dedicated to metal, we mentioned the Serpent Column and Creator albums, which were anticipated, are also out this week. And we've got a lot for you to listen to this week, both in podcasts and music form. Some quick hits. Jenny Lewis married her dog for her 50th birthday. Happy birthday and congratulations, Jenny. Slater Kinney and Fred Armisen are playing in a Ramones tribute band called The Return of Jackie and Judy, who first formed for Everybody's Live with John Mulaney. You might have caught that on, I think, Netflix. They are now playing actual live shows and have already been announced for the Bottle Rock Festival and Mosswood Meltdown. Okay. P.S. Bottle Rock Festival, weirdest lineup ever. Bandcamp will officially not permit AI music on their platform. Your move, every other streaming service. Pavement, mentioned already on this episode, I love that, has just announced a short summer tour. Geese, also announced on this episode, now for the third time, have announced a Live at Third Man record, which they also just released that MJ Lenderman Live at Third Man record not long before this one. Well, I guess they can record anybody that plays in there, so then they get to record records, release records. Goose, not to be confused with Geese, the jam band, who probably share a lot of fans with the Grateful Dead.
Or at least every Goose fan likes the Grateful Dead.
Goose fan.
It's like, it's like a circle and, a square and rectangle thing, right? Every Goose fan is a Dead fan, yes, but not every Dead fan is a Goose fan.
And Goose, could they be the successor to Fish? Fish, who continue to play multiple Madison Square Garden shows every year. The news is that Goose have announced, who have already played Madison Square Garden, have now announced 2 more Madison Square Garden shows. So they went from, it was like a big deal when they played one.
I do think they're probably the biggest jam band since Fish. At least the biggest, fully rock jam band too. Because I feel like a lot of the more recent jam stuff was mixed in with electronic and stuff. And Goose, I think, is just kind of like a guitars and bass band, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, maybe they're the... Are they to Fish as Fish were to the Grateful Dead?
Band of Horses are celebrating the 20th anniversary of their great debut album, Everything All the Time, with a tour and deluxe reissue. We've got that actually in the Brooklyn Vegan shop, shop.brooklynvegan.com, along with the new reissue of Wolf Parade, which love Sub Pop for this, due to the popularity of
Heated Rivalry.
What is it? No, that
the song,
part
I'll Believe in Anything.
I'll believe in anything. I just didn't want to say it wrong. I'll believe in everything, which became viral from the show. So now Sub Pop have put out it's like pink or something variant of the album, along with a Wolf Parade shirt with a hockey stick on it. So that's cool. You can get that vinyl in the Brooklyn Vegan shop as well. Dropkick Murphys and Haywire have a split LP. This is awesome news. Only available on their upcoming tour, on which the two bands collaborate and cover each other. Michelle Branch covered Turnstile.
Oh, awesome.
No comment.
It's awesome that she did that.
No, it's awesome that she did that. The lineup is out for the only U.S. edition of the Rolling Loud Festival, happening in 2026, including headliners Playboy Cardi, Don Toliver, NBA Youngboy, and a million artists that, honestly, we are not familiar with.
Some of them we're familiar with. But yes, the lineups
artists
make us feel more like unks than usual this year.
That's right. No, but we know a handful of artists as well in there. But there's new Sugar reissues on color vinyl. You can get those ahead of the reunion shows in the Brooklyn Vegan shop. Lamb of God just announced their new album. We have a exclusive vinyl variant of that in the shop. And go check out the Brooklyn Vegan Instagram for Andrew's new series on the bands that made new metal happen. Don't be scared. Go watch it.
And
Brooklyn
YouTube.
Vegan Instagram.
There's the full video on YouTube, more digestible versions on Instagram. This is the second new metal video we've done in the past few months. This one's called 10 classic albums that influenced nu metal. So it's not nu metal bands, it's the bands that nu metal wouldn't exist without. And our last list was called 10 nu metal albums even nu metal skeptics need to know. I think if you're a skeptic, that this is also a skeptic friendly list. So nu metal, Grateful Dead. We love lots of things with skeptics on this episode.
We do it all. And you win the award for listening this long to this episode. Thank you so much. Go like and subscribe as well. We beg of you. Talk to you next week.
Thanks for tuning in. Dave and I will be back every Friday morning with new episodes of BV Weekly. And in between the episodes, you can always get much more from us at brooklynvegan.com, on all of our social media, including Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. You can pick up records from us at shop.brooklynvegan.com. And if you like what you hear, tell your friends about us, subscribe to the show, give us a good rating. All that little stuff goes a really long way. It really helps us a lot, and we really appreciate it. So until then, thank you again, and see you next time.